Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time to talk about Force Awakens again. This time, Force Awakens by the numbers. This is using my full evaluation system, which I hadn't developed 4 years ago when I watched this movie. So let's go ahead and apply it now with the second viewing and see if we can get through this one a little bit more quickly than I usually do with my full analysis videos. Let's hop into the first broad category, production, and the first subcategory, aesthetics. I like to look at the overall way that the movie is produced, how it's filmed, how it sounds, that sort of stuff first. And this is where I think Force Awakens is still fairly strong, is in the production department. It is a very expensive movie, and you can see that money on screen for the most part. So aesthetics, I give an 8 out of 10. You could possibly say that they're higher or lower depending on how you value them. They're pretty much just imitations of the original trilogy aesthetics. We don't have any sort of completely original view of anything other than a couple of aliens. We have a new version of stormtroopers, new versions of Star Destroyers, new versions of even the set pieces we've seen before, deserts and cantinas and things like that. So everything is pretty much a reuse of the original trilogy aesthetics. And so for that reason, it comes off as a little bit boring. However, it's generally really well done. Like, they look good, they're in sharp detail, although they're a continuation of, say, Ralph McQuarrie's designs, they still work for the most part, and they're clearly done by talented people. So I give them an 8 out of 10. They can't really get higher than that without having anything original to show for it. I will say a little bit of a negative, a little bit of a quip. So they have these white plastic guns that the stormtroopers are carrying, which really just look weird. They look like little toys, and that's a detail that I didn't love. Next, photography and effects. I give these a 9 out of 10. Now, you could debate me that it should be lower or something like that, but I think this is actually where the high production movie comes in. The photography is generally well done. I'm not a huge fan of the modern cinematography style of having like shaky cam stuff, but JJ actually does it pretty well. I actually think his visual style is pretty good, and I think he does a good job overall in this movie. The CG looks really good throughout, and there's a ton of CG. The practical effects blend in pretty well. All of the compositing in the scenes is pretty much top notch. The camera is probably a little bit too dynamic for my tastes in a lot of scenes, meaning the camera is moving in and out of views of people, sweeping across, doing shaky cam stuff. And that, to me, that's not really what I prefer. And I don't think it really looks that good for Star Wars, but it's a modern style and different people are going to like it. But I have to admit that overall, the photographic style is actually done pretty well. Music, I give a 7 out of 10. I know this is John Williams, and people will automatically say he's great. This is probably one of his weaker scores. It's not entirely his fault. This movie is very, very explosive and fast-paced. It doesn't have a lot of those quiet, reflective moments that you have in the stuff that Lucas did, where the score can really be something present and can really do some storytelling of its own. Instead, what we get is a mostly phoned in score. The stuff that's new, the themes that are new, are not very memorable. Sometimes they're like a whole tone kind of sound, which you don't really remember whole tone melodies because they're not very melodic. You remember diatonic melodies. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. I think it's one of his weaker outings, and it's not entirely his fault. He said before that he wasn't able to work with a complete shot of the film. I know some of his music was cut in part of the process of trying to get it to screen. So 7 out of 10, it's good, but it's just kind of on average, really. It doesn't do a whole lot compared to previous Star Wars scores in particular. Next, sound design, I give it a 7 out of 10. This is based on my watching at home. The sound is pretty good. In the theater, I probably would have given it a lower score. It sounded way overcompressed and way loud in the theater. At home, the compression is not as bad, so if you're watching it at home, the compression is not going to upset you as much. However, it is a little bit over loud, a little bit overcompressed. There's not a lot of dynamic range, especially compared to previous Star Wars movies. The sounds don't crackle and pop and really jump out at you and sound exciting the way that they did on the prequels or the original trilogy. It's just a very flat sound. It's not terrible, like nothing sounds really distorted on the home version, but it just lacks the flavor of the originals. 7 out of 10. Overall, production score 7.75 out of 10. That's high average, bordering on good, and I think that's the strength of this movie. That's going to be the highest category. Next, let's move on to the story ratings. Now, this is really where Force Awakens, I think, is weak. Extremely weak. So let's start with the setting, and we'll do setting, characters, and plot. The setting I give a 4 out of 10. The reason I give it a 4 out of 10 is because it's basically, again, you're reusing set pieces from the original trilogy, really just set pieces from the first 2 movies. Nothing's really properly explained. We don't know where this First Order came from. We don't know what the heck they're doing. We don't know anything about the gap that happened between episode 6 and episode 7, whereas if you watch episode 3, even though that was made after the fact, we have clear idea of what's happened. There's a 20-year gap. We know exactly, everything's already set up for episode 4. This is not the case. We don't know where the First Order came from. We don't know what happened with Kylo Ren. Some people call it a mystery box. It's like, oh, there was this, Kylo Ren betrayed Luke somehow, but we don't know where Luke is. Everything is a mystery, and none of it really gets sorted out. And that's not very good for creating a coherent setting that you're going to put things in. There's also a bunch of breaking of lore and stuff that makes no sense. There's Rey talking to a droid, like understanding droid. This is something that actually didn't happen in the originals. Luke didn't understand R2-D2. He had to read a computer printout of what R2-D2 was saying or have C-3PO translate. In fact, I don't think of anybody who spoke droid. So she speaks droid to BB-8. It's a little bit weird. There's the lightsaber that talks to her and gives her visions. This lightsaber that should be dust. It makes no sense why it's put there. It's just like a little fan element. I talked about this in my video, that this is like a fan fantasy. And so because it's a fan fantasy, it's just characters moving through these set pieces that are really just inspired by the original trilogy. And it's Luke's lightsaber, that kind of stuff is just awful. You have using the Force as a Vulcan mind meld. Of course, J.J. Abrams did direct a couple of Star Trek movies, so we've known that the Force can maybe sense emotions and things. We've never seen it like probe someone's mind for a map at that level of detail. Like the Vulcan mind meld is a little bit new. Of course, we see character Rey using the Force with the proficiency of a master, having just learned that it existed a few hours beforehand. It's quite awful. So they really do a terrible job with the setting as Star Wars and how they treat the Star Wars setting. And there's no effective changes of what's been going on since the OT. It's as if the original trilogy never happened, and especially as if Return of the Jedi never happened. You have Kylo Ren praying to his grandfather, Darth Vader, with, I don't know where he got the burned up helmet, but he's got it. Darth Vader's a good guy, right? Darth Vader became a good guy at the end of Return of the Jedi and was able to be a Force ghost. So he's praying to the good guy. He's like, show me the dark side. It's like, maybe JJ will reveal in episode 9 that like he was somehow doing it for the good all along. I don't know how he's going to do it, considering how Last Jedi panned out. But anyway, the setting and the treatment of the setting, both its exposition and the way it treats the 6 movies and everything else that came before it, is just really bad. So I give it a 4 out of 10. Now, I could give it a lower score, like a 1 out of 10. But the 4 out of 10 is there because at least it introduces versions, that a new thing, even though it's inspired by here's a cantina. It's like, okay, but it's a new cantina at least. Here's a Yoda, but at least it's not Yoda. It's Maz. It's a different character, even though it's clearly just based. It's just a girl version of Yoda. Everything at least is a new iteration or new version of something that existed before in the setting. But it's just a really bad treatment of it. So it could be lower, but I'm going to give it 4 because at least they did something original with it rather than revisiting old planets over and over again. Characters, I give these a 3 out of 10. Mary Ray Sue, or Mare Ray Sue. Yeah, Mary Sue. Ray is a total Mary Sue. I've gone over this many times. I think I'm one of the first people to really talk about Rey being a Mary Sue. The second viewing, it's way more apparent. She's good at literally everything that's possible to be good at. She's able to alter all kinds of electronics by ripping things out. She walks into the Millennium Falcon, which is mysteriously fully fueled up and ready to go. We don't know why it's been, but this hasn't flown in years, but she makes it fly. She flies it better than Han Solo ever could. She does incredible things with the Millennium Falcon we've never seen the Millennium Falcon do. She meets Han Solo and he instantly likes her. They're finishing each other's sentences in horrible, cringy fan fiction dialogue. Then she learns about the Force and is able to do Jedi mind tricks and pull lightsabers out of the snow. It's just like all of these little elements are from fan fiction. There's like a lightsaber stuck in the snow and she uses her mind powers to pull the lightsaber out of the snow, just like in Empire Strikes Back. It's so silly. But yeah, she's a total Mary Sue. Absolutely awful character, completely flat, and annoying in most cases. Then you have Finn, who's really awkward and you feel a lot of pathos for him. He's just a pathetic character throughout most of this movie. At times they kind of treat him like a hero, but mostly he's a coward who is forced to do good things. He's a little bit more likable. He's big wasted opportunity. You could have had a stormtrooper with PTSD. Didn't pan out to be a very good character really at all. You have Poe, who just kind of cheeses it up. He's just a hammy little static character, way over cheerful, bordering on annoying. Harrison Ford is clearly dialing it in as Han Solo, but they also took Han Solo and they regressed him. And I mentioned this in the previous video that it's like a fan fantasy. It's how fans would imagine meeting Han Solo. They'd imagine meeting Han Solo from the first movie, not meeting Han Solo after Return of the Jedi, who's been a real hero. So they turn him back into a scoundrel that owes a bunch of people money because he's such a naughty little boy, rather than having him have achieved anything in his entire previous journey. It's just an awful treatment of Han Solo. And then they kill him. And it's actually one of the few good drama scenes, I think, in this movie is this moment between him and Kylo Ren, played by Adam Driver. And Adam Driver, I think, actually pulls it off very well. I think Adam Driver is the best actor in this movie. And in this second watching that I gave, I'd actually say the best character is Kylo Ren, and probably the only character that I think has any kind of interest to him. It's kind of emotional, raging, emo guy. Actually, I find him more interesting in the second viewing, and I think he actually carries that little scene with Han Solo. You can really feel the tremor in his voice, even though that would be awkward for like a true villain. He's supposed to be a conflicted character. And the moment where he kills Han Solo is actually, I think, a pretty good drama moment. That's why the character score is not lower. So it's pretty abysmal throughout, but we do have a couple of good drama moments. I will say most of the character drama is completely divorced from the set pieces that are there. The set pieces are arbitrary because they're there to provoke nostalgia, and characters are having drama within them. So there's really no reason for Han Solo to meet his son on this Starkiller base. Like, why are you sending a 70-year-old man on this mission to blow up, just take down the shield so you can blow up the Starkiller base? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Well, we had to send the 70-year-old man because it's Han Solo and we want to have more adventures with Han Solo because it's a fan fiction film, but also so that Han Solo could be in some geographic location close to Ben Solo so he could then, try to persuade him to come back to the light side and have this drama moment. But if you actually look, the movie's full of those. It's like the drama moments were written independent of where they would take place. They have no connection to any kind of plot, which brings me to the next thing, plot. I give a 3 out of 10 to the plot. There really isn't much of a plot. There's very, very loose connections between scenes where you think of a plot connection and just kind of get you to the next nostalgic set piece, and that's really what we're doing with this. There's kind of 2 movies in one. There's the first half of the movie, going up to about 50 minutes, that is about trying to find Luke Skywalker and get this map to Luke Skywalker back to the Resistance so Luke Skywalker could come in and save them from the First Order. The thing is that plot actually should resolve at about 50 minutes in, where they get the droid back to the Resistance, and it should continue with them going and getting Luke Skywalker and the First Order, which has Rey also trying to go get Luke Skywalker. Like, that's the way the plot should continue. But instead, they just take a sharp turn and decide that there's going to be a Starkiller base. That's the first time you see it, by the way. You see it and you're like, okay, there's a Death Star. Okay, now we got to blow up the Death Star, right? So the movie changes to the second half. It's a different movie about blowing up a Death Star. And all the characters kind of change, too, in the second half of that movie. where they kind of change the personalities a little bit. We find out Rey is a Force user in that second half. Like the second half and the first half are just like, it's like two different movies. It's like they made half a movie and then they like somebody phoned them up and said, you got to make a different movie. And so they just changed gears and started making a different movie for the rest of the movie. And that's what you got. So there's really not much of a plot. There's no decisions that any characters make in the plot that hold up to scrutiny, right? I mentioned Han Solo sending a 70-year-old man to like fly through shields, which is another part of the setting, like being able to hyperspace through shields. We're like, you can hyperspace through ships on Last Jedi. It's like they hyperspace through the shields on Force Awakens. How stupid is that? How does hyperspace directly into an atmosphere and it turn themselves into dust? Do stuff like that. Also, more setting, like they can see the Republic blowing up in broad daylight in some other solar system. Like, that's retarded. It doesn't hold up to scrutiny. So none of the decisions in the plot actually hold up to scrutiny. And why would you take I don't want to say Imperial, but they're all Imperials. Like, let's be honest. Why would you take a former First Order person and trust him to go on this mission? Like, are you stupid? None of the decisions hold up. It's just a way of connecting one set piece to another to somehow amalgamate something that approximates a plot. So plot 3 out of 10. Overall, for story, 3.3 out of 10. That's an F and a pretty low F. It's really hard to get down to 1. 1 on plot would be like there's no plot at all. Like there's no story. So let's talk about general effect, which is how I guess I generally feel about the movie. I give it a 4 out of 10. I think it has an awful treatment of established characters with the regression of Han Solo, having Luke Skywalker be run away, Leia's just kind of there, I guess. And it felt like a fan fantasy throughout. And it was very cringy dialogue. Just in general, pretty bad. If I were to go back to characters and mention acting throughout is very over the top. It's very direct and overacted, except for probably Adam Driver. And then you have Harrison Ford really just kind of phoning it in. Just looks like he doesn't want to be there. So, but it felt like fan fiction cringe throughout, and it felt like Harrison Ford knew that. He's like, this is some cringy fan fiction, and I don't want to be here. So no, it wasn't good with that. There's some okay drama, that tends to be what people remember best, are like visuals and just character drama. So that could be why a lot of people like it, is there's that pretty decent little character drama with Han and Kylo, but at the same time, it shouldn't have been able to happen logically. And then there's a lot of pretty pictures. It is, the visuals mostly hold up. They're not as exciting as they are in the theater, but they mostly hold up. So 4 out of 10 for the general effect. For me, that's me divorced from any kind of emotional reaction to this movie. I had my emotional reaction 4 years ago, so now I just don't care. That makes the total score 5 out of 10. That's an F. It is a high F because of the quality of the production, but it's still an F. That's a failing grade for a movie. But leave me your thoughts down below about The Force Awakens. What did you think about it? To me, I think it was a really bad movie, and if Last Jedi is bad, it's bad because it merely continued what Force Awakens really began. Force Awakens began with the destruction of the characters. It began with the destruction of the setting and the undoing of what mattered as far as the story goes with the original trilogy and the prequels. And it really set in motion the idea that it was going to be just about fan fantasy. And if Force Awakens is a fan fantasy, The Last Jedi is really like it's like an inversion of that. It's like, we hate Star Wars. This is you're dumb for having a fan fantasy. Like, that's an interesting thought, and I'll probably get to that when I do Last Jedi again. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I do have some books for sale. Newest one is called Eyes in the Wall. I'm not sure where I put my copy. Here it is. Got some copies down here. Woo! All right, Eyes in the Wall. This one just came out the other day. Horror story. So if you're looking for some horror, please check out Eyes in the Walls. It's 99 cents for the ebook. Voices in the Void if you want some science fiction. I call this Aliens Meets Lovecraft. A lot of people like this one. This is definitely a fan favorite. Very fast-paced little book. And newest fantasy book, Moonsong Book 1, City of Silver. So please check that one out. It's like Gunpowder Fantasy, but plenty of stuff in there that hopefully you haven't seen before. So thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you all next time. Don't forget to join my mailing list, dbspress.com/list, and You can check out my websites, davidvstewart.com, dvspress.com. Later.